There are so many components that make up a story, but the most important element, to me, will always be character. You could have the most expertly crafted plot of all time. If I don't care about the characters, I won't care about the work. Whereas if I care about the characters, the plot could literally be a trip to the DMV and I'd love it. That's why I love character-driven series so much, and I bet you're wondering why I'm bringing this up while talking about One Piece. One Piece isn't character-driven. There's some Water 7 styled exceptions in there, but for the vast majority, One Piece is a plot-driven series. I don't know who needs to hear this, but plot-driven series can still have great characters. It's not mutually exclusive. Hunter x Hunter is a character-driven series and has some great plot. It works both ways. So, who is the best character in One Piece? Well, I was going to say that stupid Cook, but I still have working brain cells, so instead I'll give the actual answer, Roronoa Zoro. When it comes to Zoro, the first thing that needs to be brought up is the dude is a badass. Oda gives the Straw Hats plenty of crowded moments of awesome, but I don't think anyone gets them as consistently as Zoro. Maybe Luffy, but Luffy doesn't give off the badass vibes all the time since his personality leans a lot more goofy. Zoro exudes a bamf aura 83% of the time, and the other 17% of the time he's either lost or embarrassed. And when it comes to the coolest moments of the series, it's hard to top nothing happening. I don't want to make it seem like Zoro doesn't have anything beyond being the cool one, but still, so much of his appeal is entrenched in how awesome he is that we have to address it as arguably his strongest selling point. And that all begins at the very foundation of his character, his design and signature fighting style. Zoro is a swordsman, which is something that immediately attracted me to his character. Swords are easily the coolest weapons, it's why I don't mind the amount in Smash. And beyond that, I also love Samurai and the Bushido Code, which while Zoro isn't a samurai, he does embody the Bushido principles of honor and loyalty. Just ask Vivis, you knew what was up. But Zoro's not just your run-of-the-mill swordsman, he's the most unsanitary swordsman in anime with his Santoryu fighting style. 2 in hand, 1 in mouth. I love his 3-sword style. Oda managed to find a way to make Zoro immediately distinct from the thousands of other sword wielders in the medium, and then instill Zoro's character with Oda's creative charm from right out of the gate. And I love how much his fighting style is represented throughout his design. Good stuff like his Haramaki showcasing a more traditional Japanese fashion sensibility, especially fitting since it was originally used during war times, but I more so appreciate how much threes influence his style. There's obviously his swords, can't wield them if he doesn't carry them, but additional touches like his arrows having 3 gold dangles, or his color palette usually being limited to 3 colors, helps the design stand out a lot more. Granted, in manga, the latter point isn't as noticeably effective, and his later outfits don't handle it as well, but in his original design, the color placement is on point. When it comes to his attire, he only has 3 colors, white, black, and green. I also love how they're positioned, with the green being a divider between the yin and yang. It also makes for a striking punctuation when he wears the bandana. As while his hair doesn't serve as a straight divider, it's still peeking out from the sides and back helps his design keep some poetry to the color flow. But this pretentious dialogue aside, his bandana is another fantastic element of his design and aids immensely in his badassness. It looks cool, of course, but the usage of it as a method to signal Zoro's ready to go all out is very effective. Luffy uses a similar effect with his straw hat, which admittedly is often used better than Zoro's bandana since there's a stronger emotional attachment to the hat, and it can be expressed to signify the strengths of Luffy's bond. But the principle of it being an effective prelude to action is true in both cases. The very motion of Zoro putting on his bandana is a hype moment, solely because we know what this means for Zoro. It's like putting on boxing gloves. It's so strongly tied to Zoro being badass that the article of clothing itself is enough to breed excitement. And when it comes time for combat, Zoro hosts several of the strongest fights in the series. I'm not sure who I'd actually give the nod of best fights to. Luffy and Usopp both have numerous classics as well, but Zoro is definitely in contention. There's my natural bias towards swords at play, but there's several other reasons why Zoro's fights stand out among the rest of the crew. Now, I'm going to primarily be focused on his battles pre-time skip, since post-time skip, Zoro doesn't really have fights anymore as much as he has showcases of how strong he is. There's the coolness factor that comes with swords, best exemplified in his duel that didn't happen with Ryuma, which is one of my favorite fights due to its unique structure and how quick it plays out. But what truly makes Zoro's fights stand out is the sense of consequence and growth to them. The former is most highlighted in his battle with Mihawk, losing 2 of his 3 swords and getting severely injured. Admittedly, none of his other fights have as much negative consequence as that one, but it's still notable that his encounters can leave Zoro in a worse condition that does affect the plot, like his sword getting rusted in Enies Lobby. This exists outside of fights, but Zoro's journey with his swords getting swapped out is excellent. It gives him a stronger sense of progression than the rest of the Straw Hats, sans maybe Luffy. It also means that it's not just Zoro with the personal connection to the blades, but the audience as well. I know I'm personally going to be upset if he ever has to fight with Kotetsu. And when it boils down to it, Zoro's growth is what truly makes his battles stand out. One of the main reasons Enies Lobby is seen as the peak of One Piece for many is because every member of the crew fought and got stronger. They each got their notable moment of advancement. Luffy got the gears, Nami showed off the perfect climb attack, Usopp became Soga King, Sanji got Diablo Jambe, Robin wants to live, Chopper brought out Monster Point, and Zoro went 9 sword style with Ashura. For the rest of the Straw Hats, this was something special, but for Zoro, this was par for the course. When Zoro had a true opponent, it was a chance for improvement. The aforementioned Ryuma fight got him a new sword, but earlier encounters developed his abilities further. The Daz Bones fight forced him to learn how to cut steel and nothing, and then in Skypiea, he taught himself how to create air projectiles, using it to defeat Arm. This is in part why his lack of struggle in the New World feels justified. Because of all characters, Zoro's been the only one who's been noticeably developing his prowess. It only feels fitting that we get to experience the fruits of his labor. And in truth, when discussing why Zoro's the best, it really does boil down to this journey of self-improvement, his goal to become the best swordsman in the whole world. If Zoro's not on the ship sleeping, which relatable, then he's on the ship training, which not relatable. And what makes this work so effectively is that Zoro is just some dude. Do you want to know what my biggest issue with One Piece is? It's that Pell survived, but after that, it's the amount of destiny intertwined in the narrative. Particularly with Luffy's dream to become king of the pirates, because as the series progresses forward, it feels more and more like a chosen one story, like Luffy will succeed because he's predestined to. He has the will of D, he has Conqueror's Haki, he's the son of the leader of the revolutionary, he's brothers with the son of the king of the pirates, he has strong ties to one of the Yonko. Where's the straw hat of Shanks and Gold D. Roger? Luffy's tied to Roger, both in visual design when Rayleigh first met Roger, and by their secret proclamation. And Luffy has the voice of all things. And look, Oda handles this destiny element as well as one could. Like, plenty of people have the will of D and Conqueror's Haki, so it's not like Luffy is presented as the one and only in most of these circumstances. Still, nothing disengages me more than the destined route. It always feels like it takes away from the efforts of the characters. I know it doesn't really in a fictional sense, but narratively speaking, that's always how it comes across, that they were just born to fit into this role, rather than working towards and earning the reward. It's a personal gripe, but I know I'm not the only one with this opinion. Thankfully, that's where Zoro comes in, because Zoro isn't special. Presumably, we don't actually know about his parentage, but I really hope Oda doesn't pull a Sanji on Zoro, because as Zoro is now, is the strongest source of inspiration in One Piece. I find it difficult to find much motivation from Luffy's exploits when he has so much stacked in his favor, but Zoro has nothing. He's just some bloke from the East Blue who decided to dedicate his life to one goal. And we see his efforts throughout the series, constantly training, constantly getting new scars, constantly getting stronger through battle. One of the biggest reasons why One Piece's destiny thread doesn't bother me as much as it does in, say, Naruto, is because we have Zoro as a counterpoint. There are a few more reasons I love Zoro that I want to quickly address before signing off. Despite being the badass character, I honestly find him to be one of the funniest in the entire series. His running gag of him getting lost Lost is legitimately my favorite recurring joke in all of One Piece. I love the way Oda constantly ramps up how ridiculous it is. For example, in Wano, Zoro somehow manages to get lost despite riding a dog, and the best part is that Zoro doesn't acknowledge his lack of direction ever. All Zoro had to do was sit on a dog but somehow get separated from it and then blames the dog for getting lost? It's a beautiful gag that manages to remain fresh and funny every single instance it comes up. Variations like Zoro miraculously arriving on Sabaody first was a hilarious change of pace as well. Humor is subjective and kind of difficult to interestingly analyze, so the last thing I really want to discuss is Zoro's role in the crew. Luffy is a pretty great captain for several reasons. His ability to emotionally connect with his crew and create strong bonds, his willingness to do anything for his crew and ability to actually keep all those promises, and his admission that all members of his crew are essential to him and their success. This includes him allowing others to take the charge in certain instances, most prominently with Nami's navigation. Luffy will always follow her instructions whenever dealing with a storm. And this relates to Zoro because Zoro, as the first mate, more or less functions to keep the crew in track, but particularly Luffy. I'm of course referring to the CP9 saga, where the focus was on the internal drama within the crew, both in Usopp's departure and Robin's disappearance. One of the most fascinating scenes in all of One Piece is Luffy and Usopp's argument, and one of the reasons for that is in the reaction of all the bystanders involved. You got Nami trying to argue Luffy's point for him to help Usopp understand before being told to stay out of it. You have Sanji trying to calm him down when things start getting too heated, then attacking Luffy when he was about to take it too far, and then you have Zoro who seemed content to let them hash out their feelings when things got going. However, it's in the moments afterwards where Zoro displays his value. When it's too heavy for Luffy, Zoro is the one who keeps his composure. Zoro is the one who reminds Luffy of his role, both the value Luffy has as a captain and the burden. And when Usopp wants to come back, it's Zoro that makes it clear that Usopp has to accept accountability for leaving the crew and challenging Luffy to a duel before he can be welcomed back, that he can't just return as if nothing happened. Zoro is the one who can set Luffy straight. He never demeans Luffy's perspective or his authority. Instead, he reinforces the importance of Luffy's role and makes sure he's responsible for it. Another example would be telling Luffy to get serious in Punk Hazard, and this attitude isn't restricted just to Luffy, though that's the most interesting dynamic. One of the few things I liked about the Davy Back fight arc was Zoro's speech to Chopper, his way of reinstilling faith in Chopper, and having him accept the result for the time being in a more honorable fashion. Zoro, often acting as a voice of reason who can set the crew straight, is one of the reasons he's such a great character. If I haven't convinced you that Zoro is the greatest character in the series, I would like to remind you that nothing happened. Not only is it an incredibly badass moment just due to the feat itself, but the amount of loyalty Zoro displayed during the whole Kuma encounter is worthy of praise in of itself. There's also his backstory, which is incredibly simple, especially in the manga, but I still think there's a more human grounded element to it that makes it effective, though admittedly not one of the best. Still, I think we can all agree that Zoro is the best character of One Piece because of all the words I've just said. And if I'm wrong and you disagree, feel free to correct me in the comments below. Everyone's entitled to their own opinions, and if you think a different character is better, I welcome your thoughts with open arms. Unless you think the best character is Sanji, you all can leave.